listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. Don't forget you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Drew Duncan 83. Additionally, you can find me on YouTube as Drew Duncan. And as always, you can tell Alexa to play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan on Spreaker Radio. Boy, Vince McMahon has really blasted back onto the scene with this whole XFL thing, hasn't he? And you got to admit, it couldn't have come at a better time. I mean, what perfect delivery by Vince McMahon. Hey, we're in between the end of the season, between the Super Bowl and the end of the season in the NFL. College football is over with. Yeah, what a perfect time to bring in, hey, by the way, guys, I'm starting the XFL. And, of course, the XFL, the main thing that everybody's been really concerned about with, I think, for the most part, from what I've seen, is, what is the caliber of athlete that is going to be in the XFL? And obviously, people alluded to top three names, right? Tim-Tebow, Johnny Manziel, and Colin Kaepernick. And I think that Vince McMahon all but eliminated those guys with a couple of simple statements. Number one, he said that you're going to have to stand for the national anthem. So obviously, if Colin Kaepernick wants to be in the league, he'd have to stand for the national anthem. I'm not going to get into whether we like it or not, whether you agree with it or not. This is not that show. What I'm telling you is the facts. And right now, Vince McMahon has said that you're going to have to stand for the national anthem. So unless Kaepernick wants to stand, which, by the way, he did not really retract, but say that he would stand for the national anthem. So there's a possibility that we could see Kaepernick in the NFL. So he's not all but eliminated from the XFL yet. Then you think about Johnny Manziel, and Manziel was all over Twitter. It's comeback season, and I'm ready to go. And I thought he was still talking about the CFL thing that was going on over the last, 2 seasons, basically, of football. And nope, he's talking about the XFL. Obviously, he had an insider track, and Vince McMahon all but eliminated him and said, look, you're not going to have an arrest record to play in the XFL. We're not going to do it. Now, I get it. There's a lot of people out there that will say, look, Manziel had the case dismissed, and that was because, and that was of November of last year. And if you know about this, then you would know that Manziel had it dismissed after he took domestic violence classes and did the community service that the judge ordered him to do. So does Vince McMahon, when he says the caliber of human being is important to him, does that mean no arrests whatsoever? Or does that mean I got arrested, but now my criminal record is gone? So Johnny Manziel may not all but be eliminated, but probably so. Then, of course, everybody brought up the name Tim-Tebow, one of the most controversial players in the history of football. Loved or hated, and that was it. There's no in between with this guy. I mean, there really is not. We all know what happened. Great magical season in Denver. Goes on to the Jets. Doesn't do anything there. Goes on to New England. Gets cut there. Comes back with Philly, I should say. I actually thought it looked pretty good. Chip Kelly said, nope, not the guy that we were looking for. He gets cut from there. And in 2016, Tim-Tebow said, look, man, my career in the NFL is over. I'm done. And as reports have been circulating about Tebow, it looks like he's going to get an official tryout with the New York Mets after being in the lower leagues, AAAs and AAs for a while. So it looks like Tim-Tebow may get a crack at Major League Baseball. So if that's going to happen, then why would Tebow go and get his head slammed in the XFL? I think that when I look at the criminal arrest record thing, when I look at we're going to stand for the national anthem thing, I think what Vince McMahon is obviously trying to do is cash in on all the controversy that the NFL has had, cash in on all the boycotts, cash in on all of the alleged domestic violence and violent charges, period. There are guys that are serving, prison sentences for alleged murder crimes like Ray Caruth and so many others that Vince McMahon is obviously saying, we are not going to have that in this league. We're going to make it as controversial free as possible. And what that's going to entail is you get arrested, you're not in this league anymore. Period. I mean, obviously, that's going to be the stipulation. Hey, we're just going to eliminate this whole whether or not we think it's okay to stand for the anthem or not thing by you're just going to stand for it, and that's all there is to it. We're done. And if you don't want to do it, then you're not going to be in the league, and so you won't get signed. Now, obviously, if Kaepernick still wants to, take a knee for the national anthem, it's going to create some controversy. But I think Vince McMahon is trying to say, look, in the NFL, there's a lot of people who think that this stuff is okay. It's not okay, and we want to try and eliminate it. Now, obviously, Vince McMahon's WWE is not without sin. There's been stuff about steroids, obviously the thing about Chris Benoit happening, Stone Cold Steve Austin, as much as people love him, including myself. There was the alleged situation with domestic violence in Deborah, his wife. So though his company is not without sin, for whatever reason, in his XFL, he is all but eliminating those possible scenarios. Now, obviously, it's not to say that people won't get in trouble on his watch, but what he is saying is if you do get in trouble, you're not going to be a part of this league, period. Whether you like that or not, hey, I'll leave that for you guys to discuss. But I think for me, when I start thinking about the caliber of athlete, if I'm Vince McMahon and I get away from all this other stuff and I start thinking about whether or not Tebow or whoever will be in the league, I think about other players. You know, the Minnesota Vikings have 3 guys all by themselves that could potentially end up in the XFL. Because Case Keenum had a hell of a year, guys. And Terry Bridgewater hasn't played in a full season now, season and a half, 2 seasons. Sam Bradford's been kind of hit and miss in the NFL, flashes of greatness, then not so great. So what's going to happen with the quarterback situation with the Minnesota Vikings? I mean, you've got 3 guys in that scenario alone that could all wind up being in the XFL because they'll be looking for work. And there's a lot of guys that could be looking for work in the XFL. There's a lot of guys that could be out there that haven't played a game of football for a while. Guys, look, there's only 32 teams in the NFL. There's only going to be an addition of 8 in the XFL. You've got over 14,000 players on rosters and 130 Division I college football teams alone. That's excluding subdivisions and community colleges and JUCOs. It's excluding all of those. The recruiting opportunities are going to be enormous for Vince McMahon in the XFL. And honestly, if I'm McMahon, I'm not looking at the NFL as my direct competition. I'm looking at the CFL, the Canadian Football League, as my competition. Because there's a lot of guys that didn't make it in the NFL that went over there. You know, the USFL drafted some guys that ended up having decent NFL careers. Off the top of my head, I automatically think about Steve Young. I automatically think about Jim Kelly. They had the Heisman Trophy winner, Herschel Walker. Now, he didn't do so great in the NFL. He's kind of flash in the pan. But obviously, on a collegiate level, he was great. And there's a lot of guys that are great in the collegiate level, and they're not great in the NFL, which is why the NFL is so choosy to begin with about who they have on their roster. Then you've got practice squad guys that you can go to in the NFL. Hey, man, they don't want to pay you to play. They just want you on a practice squad. Why don't you come on over to the XFL? Rod Smith, a guy in Denver, somebody I can automatically think about that ended up having a great 12-year career in the NFL after coming up from the practice squad. There's a lot of untapped talent out there, guys. And I think that we're just a little too enamored with all the top dogs and the names that we know. And we know these names because they're pushed down our throats. Don't think for one moment that Vince McMahon's not going to be out there with a completely different set of scouting reports while having a completely set of same scouting reports as the NFL or a CFL. Don't think for one moment that I think that Vince McMahon is taking a completely different approach to this and saying, you know, why do we need to go after somebody that didn't play for 3 years and was kind of sitting around? Why don't we just take kids right out of the collegiate? Why don't we just go for them? I mean, you've got 2 quarterbacks right now alone at the University of Alabama that could be considered NFL guys. Look at what Tua did in the national championship game, and look at what the original quarterback did just to get him there. So you got two guys right there. Think about all the different transfers that are going on. Look, everybody's talking about Allen out of Wyoming. They're talking about Mayfield out of Oklahoma. They're talking about all these different guys into the draft, and we're only in a handful. What about Ferguson out of Memphis? He's a hell of a quarterback, and he's already got a very good connection with his wide receiver, Miller. Who's to say that maybe they couldn't end up on the same team in the XFL, provided that the NFL doesn't give those guys a look? Think about that for a moment. There are a lot of players out there, guys, and the XFL is going to have a 40-man roster, 8 teams, and they are going to be able to give guys guaranteed jobs. Hey, man, the NFL didn't draft you? We'll take you. We think you're going to be great. Why don't you come on over here? Just think about that for a moment. Let that really sit in and resonate. I think that we're overblowing all the, quote, big names, because there's a lot of guys out there that would love to get an opportunity that aren't going to be looked at. Think about players at like Central Michigan, and then think about some of the guys that made it in the NFL that didn't even come from big universities. Joe Flacco, was he at Delaware State? Shannon Sharp, if I remember correctly, he was at Savannah State. Jerry Rice wasn't at a big-time university. There's a lot of guys that are cut from a different cloth, and they go other places either because they go unnoticed or they put their education as their primary priority, and they're thinking about football as, yeah, this is what I want to do in my life, but I need to make sure that I've got this education and degree as a backup. The XFL may go looking at other guys that the NFL isn't looking at and saying, you're in your 3rd year, we don't know yet, but stick around in college for another year, and we'll see. This is going to be good for the game of college football, guys. It's going to make recruiting a lot more intense. People are worried about that, but I don't think that that's an issue. I think the recruiting is going to get better now because guys are going to know that there's more than one opportunity out there. Competition makes everybody around you better. I'm thinking about coaches. Hey, Chip Kelly was in the NFL for a while. He's at UCLA now, but doesn't he want to go pro again? Didn't Vince McMahon talk about a faster game, maybe no halftimes? What if it's a 12-minute clock instead of a 15-minute clock in those quarters? Wouldn't that be a guy like Chip Kelly's alley? Wouldn't he be the beneficiary of having something like that? Think about that for a moment. Who can boat race anybody better than Chip Kelly with his style of offense? And how many games did he lose simply because there was too much time left and he refused to take his foot off the gas? Something like the XFL, where Vince McMahon is making it sound like it's going to be this boat race, quick, fast, to the point. Chip Kelly would excel. Why wouldn't I go after Chip Kelly? Dude, I don't care what UCLA is paying you. You don't have to go through the headache of recruiting. You're just going to draft guys. You're just going to you're going to do all the things you did in the NFL. You're going to do it here. You're going to be a pro again. Howard Schnellenberger jumped ship from Miami to go to the USFL, and it was a big get at the time. We have a long time to dissect this. There are a lot of things that are going to happen with the XFL. Hell, for all we know, guys, it might even fall through. It's 2 years until it starts going. 2020. That means it's either going to be in the springtime or potentially summertime football, maybe fall. But we have a very long time until this all officially goes down. And in the meantime, I think we just need to kind of relax a little bit, enjoy the ride, and maybe start expanding our college football knowledge to other teams. Start looking at the other guys. Think about Central Florida, 13-0. Who the hell saw that coming? Expand your knowledge on those guys and their potential and what they could do in a place like the XFL. I think we could see great football if this does happen, and if they do it this way, I think it could be great. I love competition, and I think it's the best thing that we could possibly do is give something the NFL hasn't really seen before, and that is legitimate, true, long-lasting competition. It will force them to change the way that they do things. This is the Full Court Press. I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all at Drew Duncan 83. Don't you dare touch that dial.